Welcome, guys, to session 3. I'm with the extraordinary Benjamin, who's also been a great friend along this journey of entrepreneurship with me. This is Niche 360, and we're really about trying to showcase entrepreneurs that are doing great things in the world and make sure that we can maybe try and inspire you, equip you, and connect you so that you too can become someone that makes a difference in communities. So, Benjamin, thanks so much for making the time to join us at Niche 360.
Thank you, Aaron, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, really appreciate that. And I'm also so excited to have you here as a host, as a guest, because, I've been really curious about how your mind works and ask you a lot of questions outside just the brand of itself of the A New World Together. But before we get into that, maybe if you could share with the audience a little bit about yourself and how you came up with A New World Together, New World Wisdom, and New World Altogether. How did that journey start, and why did you pick those names?
So, well, I have to say the journey started at a very young age. But to sum it up, I never felt really like I was fitting in. And I always had this deep feeling that there was something wrong in the way humans behave and in the way I behave. And that has been kind of haunting me from a very young age. And later, when I grew up a teenager, I started to realize that I had this feeling that the way we behave is not only wrong, it's not sustainable. And and so it was just a feeling and I couldn't really express it into words. But as I grew up, I started to get more and more reports about what is happening on the surface of the globe, and that become increasingly more haunting. I still carried a professional career that was very successful, corporate career. So I was a manager, and then a senior manager, and then an expert consultant. And during this career, I just had more and more confirmation that this is not, that this cannot last. I mean, all I could see is we were so focused on short-term profits and on getting more this month than the previous months, and we had absolutely no time to think about the ecological and social impacts. It was just about racing for always more. Yeah. And so that created a cognitive dissonance in me that became more and more difficult to live with. And in 2016, I decided to quit. That's when my company said, no, Benjamin, we still want you. And I became an expert consultant. But that lasted for a year. And in 2017, that was the time where I took this leap of faith and completely quit my dream career to join the unknown. And that led me to, at first, I thought I was going to fight the bad guys who are running the planet. And I ended up not fighting myself, but going back inward. And I went through a journey of inner discovery. A lot of veil fell off. I had a lot of realizations that were key for understanding what is happening on the surface of the globe and why we are behaving in sustainable ways. And so New World Together and New World Wisdom are tools that I use to share what I have acquired in this journey, which I think is very, very important knowledge and breakthrough that needs to be shared with the rest of the
Wow, that's powerful. So do you feel, I mean, I noticed and I know a bit about your background, but maybe if you don't mind sharing a little bit about this transformation that you went through in as much details as you can, just in terms of how much you feel suffering has a big part to play with some of your later on getting the downloads or the revelations. Do you think there was a connection between the two? And if so, what was that journey like for you?
Sure. So that's a very important question, and thanks for asking it. I really appreciate that. It's a very, very good question. So what I discovered is that all this time I was in my career and, trying to be the best I could, is that I was basically running away from myself and from my unresolved traumas, from my primitive fears, and from my limiting beliefs. I was actually just trying to convince myself that I was fine. And so because I wasn't feeling fine inside of me, I was depending on the feedback on the outside. So everybody was saying, Benjamin, you're great, you're confident, you are successful. Everybody was happy about my career. But that didn't feel right on the inside. But the fact that it was being said on the outside kept me going for a while.
Mm.
until I really realized that, when I became an expert consultant, I had so much free time because I was working 40 hours a month. And this free time was really obliging me to look at the mirror and see my compulsive behaviors. It's a short story because that's a story. Like I used to, because this inner tension, I used to throw it away in intense sport. So I was doing football, kickboxing, Thai boxing, and surf every week. I was doing like intense sports 6 times a week. And at that moment, when I became an expert consultant and all this free time, I had an elbow injury, which means that I couldn't do sport anymore.
Yeah, yeah.
So I didn't have a way to that energy that I used to just send was just stuck. And I realized that I was really not fine, that there was a real problem. And 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 later on my discovery, what I found out is all these traumas that I had, and many of them were not only my trauma, they were the traumas of my family, and I'm talking about my lineage, but also
Wow.
about my people, my country, I mean, it was really interesting to see that what I was feeling on the inside was completely related to the past and what we haven't resolved from the past. And I realized that this is what triggers all our compulsive behaviors, all our addictions. And from my point of view, we live in a society based on addiction. We're addicted to consumerism, we're addicted to career, we're addicted to status, we're addicted to so many things, but it's not sports, sex, and I'm not talking about everyone,
Mm.
but most of us have some type of addiction. And that to me relate to the problem of sustainability that we are having on the global scale. Is that we just can't stop to compete for growth and we just don't know where to stop it. And what I realized from my experience is that because we don't want to see what is inside us, we are running away from our pain instead of transcending it, recognizing
Mm.
that an heritage that requires to be transcended.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and so another point that is really important is that to tap into this knowledge and this to access this knowledge, I had to go through insanity, literally. I mean, there was a stage when I quit my career and I got completely lost, where I lost my sanity, and I had to.
Mm.
That's because I was deconstructing the belief systems that had shaped my identity, and I didn't have anything reconstructed yet. So for a certain time, it lasted for a year and a half. I was really struggling to get back to grounding. And so the only way for me to gain back sanity was to make sense of everything, basically everything. I had to
Mm.
make sense of everything. And so it was almost a need for survival. It's like to go back to sanity without the medicine that the psychiatrists were wanted to give me, and they were saying you got to take it for your life. I didn't want that. I was like, I got to make sense of everything that is happening to me. And so that's also was a big part of um, that's also the journey that led me to access all this knowledge.
Wow. Wow, that's powerful. And thanks so much for sharing that, because I think we had some previous discussions in our journey around that period. And maybe just to expand a little bit on that, you mentioned that you had to, because you're going through trauma, but you had to uh, unpack everything that was going on around you to make sense of everything for you to feel sane again. So maybe first, could you share with us, if you don't mind, what was it like to maybe be quote unquote labeled insane, and what was the trauma you were experiencing then, and then at what point did you overcome that so that people again can vet you as sane enough to come back into society? Was there any exclusions, or what was that journey like for you?
Yeah. So first, just to say, that's because there's many perspectives to it, and
Mm.
so there could be like this, there's books to write about it.
Yeah, yeah,
But
just your experience. Yeah.
basically, um, basically the problem with I lost my sanity when I accessed information that I was not ready to digest, and
Mm.
so I misinterpreted my ego, took it. So for example, at the beginning, I had the kind of the prophet complex, thinking
Mm-hmm.
that I am the savior and that I am the chosen one, and all this stuff. That's because I had accessed really powerful knowledge, but
Mm.
I was not ready to accept it. Another thing that I noticed afterward is that the perceptions that I have to access intuitively some kind of knowledge or to perceive things that most people yet I feel are not really perceived is was not compatible with my belief system and my education. So I tended to repress them unconsciously. And so that was creating kind of a build-up of repressed information and repressed emotions. So me going inside was kind of this door of emotions and information opening up at once and completely overwhelming. So talking about how did I, because of course at the beginning it was a very difficult moment for me. I mean, when this happened, basically I was sent in the psychiatric hospital and everybody was telling me, you're insane, just take your medication. And I had a very tough choice to make because it was either I listen to what everyone is saying or I trust myself. But everyone is saying that I'm sick and the psychiatrists are telling me that I'm sick. So, and that if I don't listen to them, I would endanger my life. So that was kind of a big choice. So, short story on that is one of the first intuition I had when I got grounded was that in order to access the knowledge that I want to access, I had to be ready to accept insanity and death. And I kind of made a hard contract with that. So I was like, okay, I'm ready to take the risk because the information I'm looking at is for a greater purpose. It's just not about me. It's about achieving sustainability as a species. And that's for me was really important. So basically, like, I kind of took the risk of listening to myself and risking to insanity and death. And so, but at the beginning, I was very ego driven and kind of, well, I'm not going to listen to you, I'm going to do what I want, which was really created a time that I said for quite a while where I was really rejected by everyone, considered like insane or weird. And it started to shift when I realized that I had to do the inner work. Because at the beginning, being in my ego, I was kind of, oh, they are all wrong, I am right. And I did not introspect about how my behavior was inappropriate and antagonizing people. And that behavior, which was inappropriate and antagonizing people, was unconscious and not conscious, as I thought it was. So, and that's where I started to realize all the compulsive, primitive patterns that I had in me. And so that led me little by little to go back to grounding myself and to really understand how I can transmit the message that I want to transmit without being seen as crazy, without being rejected. And so that has been a journey. It's still ongoing because I'm still sharpening my ways, but it's far, I mean, I have to compare where I was 3 years ago. It's like it's a miracle. It's a miracle.
Wow. So you were saying you had to make a conscious choice as you were receiving this information. How do you feel that information was coming? Was it a voice coming to you? Was it a man, a woman? Was it just an awareness from within? Because you mentioned you had an acuteness to know that, okay, you're getting some truths that were coming in that you needed to listen to. And at the same time, you knew by taking the medication that maybe this would be numbed out, I'm assuming. So what did that experience feel like for you? How did you know this was coming from somewhere? And if so, where do you think it came from?
Okay, so it's really, the thing with intuitive information is information that's coming from the heart, right? It's really from the heart, from the center. There were so many channels. I mean, there were some moments like the information was coming through a musical clip that I will find on YouTube randomly, you know, and I will go on the clip and be like, damn, there's a message for me there. Most of the time it comes by, for example, I will be interacting with some people, have an exchange, and then suddenly there will be a download. You know, either information about these people or information about some kind of mechanism, etc. Another ways would be like, because I realize one of my gifts is the ability to tap in the collective unconscious and to be able to decode it. So, for example, if I will look at a political publicity of an advertisement for a policeman, I will decode some of the unconscious energies that are behind it. And it will come naturally. We just see it, just like I see it in front of me. Just like, and this is the corpseness. It's just like, oh, okay, all right, there is this, there is that. And I'm like, and people don't see that because otherwise they would surely not vote for these politicians. But yeah. So it's really, I don't know, it's kind of coming on the farm. And I would say the more I work on my unconscious and I make it conscious, the more the veil are falling out and reality appears more clearly with much more sense. And so what I really like in this process is the ability to sense make it. And that's really beautiful. And I'm not talking about some kind of woo sense making. I'm talking about really logical, rational, factual interpretation of our reality out of this intuitive access to knowledge and the ability to create and conscious.
Yeah, wow. So you mentioned something that was really interesting, collective consciousness, and I've had conversations with you about this. Could you maybe expand on what that is and how someone who maybe isn't aware of it can be able to point at it? Yeah, that's the experience of collective consciousness. This is what collective consciousness is. So from your experience, how would you be able to make someone understand that's maybe never thought about it?
Great. So I'm going to talk about collective consciousness and collective unconsciousness because these are two sides of the same coin, right? So for example, let me first say one thing. That when we talk about consciousness, today's science estimates that this is 2% of what we are aware of in the way we behave. 98% of our decision making is unconscious. When we talk about the collective, it's the same, right? So only the collective consciousness is the part which we are aware of. So for example, we look at society, there's a country, there's a religion, okay, that's collective consciousness, is what we see. The collective unconscious is what is hidden under this collective consciousness. So for example, we are going to talk, here we start to talk about archetypes, about energies, about unconscious belief systems. So basically, to sum it up, because I like things to be clear and simple, the collective unconscious, what we see is mainly collective belief systems that on which very often, so there is our social constructs are established on, right? So for example, Christianity is a collective belief system. And the social construct on it is the church, the Vatican, and all this institutionalized institutionalized social construct that dominate the world today. So if we look behind the social construct and the behavior they trigger, because let's say that social construct define our social norms and therefore our collective behaviors, there are unconscious collective beliefs, unconscious collective fears, and unconscious traumatic memories or unconscious unresolved traumas. And so all our society is based in these unconscious foundations. Unfortunately, today, we are very unaware of the unconscious part, which means we are very unaware of the unresolved collective traumatic memories. We are very unaware of the primitive fear and of the unconscious belief that are running in the background of our system and driving our behaviors.
Why is that, you think? Why are we unaware to start with?
That's because becoming aware of it requires to face what I would call our shadow, or the parts of ourselves that we don't want to see. It's about recognizing that we are wounded, fearful creatures that do not trust ourselves and each other. And so the belief system, the social constructs that we have are kind of repressing this. It's about facing our inner chaos. And so yeah, basically we are unaware of that because I'm going to give you one of the reasons, there's many ones, but I think that's one of the core reasons. We also live in a society in which we are being asked to always, be smiling, be positive, where like, for example, being sad or being anxious or being angry, which which is part of the result of doing the shadow work, tends to be pathologized by, it tends to be that, oh no, you're not normal, it's just sad, it's just depressed, it's not normal. But in fact, what I recognize is that doing the shadow work and going to see this part of ourselves that we don't want to see is painful. It triggers all the negative emotions that we are repressing and all the unresolved traumas that we are repressing. And when we talk about collective traumas, it's even bigger because we're talking about collective pains. So going through those is really, really tough. So that's why we mainly why we're not working, because we're running away from pain. We want to feel good.
That's interesting. So let's talk about trauma. How would you define trauma?
Okay, great. So trauma, that's really important, very important. So there's different types of traumas, but there is major traumas that we are all aware of. There is more subtle traumas. For example, when a kid, especially from a very young age, 0 to 3, is not feeling safe, is not feeling secure by his parents, it can already create traumas. There is collective traumas as well. For example, war, for example, slavery, for example, panic, for example, all this stuff that happened in the past, past history, which is very dramatic. I mean, we have all this kind of stuff, where basically that gives an information unconsciously that the world is dangerous. That you cannot be yourself, but you gotta somehow follow the norms to not be rejected. You got to compete to access resources, and you got to engage in rivalry for power, because the world is perceived as a dangerous place. And so that's all resulting from traumas, which is a moment where we felt very insecure, and we imprinted the memory that, this is a dangerous place, and so I need to remain in survival. Also, a very important point about trauma is that we start to know now, and science shows that, is that the result of unresolved traumas is disconnection from the true self.
Is disconnection?
From the true self.
Okay.
Disconnection from ourselves. So, to a point, for example, specialists in addictions now recognize that the root cause of addiction is trauma. Like, people feel so disconnected from themselves, it creates a feeling of inner anxiety that they will try to compensate by using drugs, alcohol, or being addicted to work, being addicted to money, being addicted to sex, being addicted to sport. Some of them being socially encouraged, some of them being illegal.
So, from your experience, how did you, back to the connection with the story on the decision on insanity and the trauma and people labeling you, how did that feel for you, and what trauma do you think it created, and what would you tell other people who may be going through similar experiences? What could they do in terms of tools, or how did you go about overcoming that trauma?
Well, because there's a lot of questions here, but let me just, so for example, let's talk about overcoming this period of time where someone is going through a phase where they are losing touch with reality and getting to antagonize their family and others. I think first, because very often there's many different cases, but from my experience, it was a problem of ego, which means that I was accessing information, and unconsciously, my first reaction was, I want to control and dominate the world with that. And so I want to push this on everyone.
Yes.
And I'm not going to accept rejection.
Right.
Because I'm right and they are wrong. And so the message I want to say is that if you create problems, if it doesn't go smooth, go back to introspection. Go back to look inside. Stop, look at what patterns are driving in the background, and seek help. Seek help, and I'm not talking about necessarily the help of the psychiatrist, anyway, if the person who requires the help of the psychiatrist is the person who cannot hear anything anymore, and just need to be temporarily numbed down by medication. I'm not taking a long-term treatment. So seek help from people who can help you to do the introspective work. People with perceptions, people who can speak honestly with you, people that you trust.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Like there's more and more people like that today because there's more and more people developing disability. Uh, Another thing is understand that this is probably due to what we call in French décalage of consciousness.
What's that?
It's the consciousness just being a little bit uh, either to upward or how to say going a little bit sideways. So it's about recentering that. And be patient because it's a process that will take time. On my side, it took me 1 year and a half to really be able to understand what this was about and what exactly I was supposed to do with it. So, and trust that this is journey for the greater good. That if this is happening to you, there's really a potential for evolution and the potential to access new gifts on the other side.
So I'm just trying to go through this because we've had some conversations, if you remember, when I was going through my homeless periods. I've got a few, and there was a conscious decision to keep going with my truth, knowing full well that I would be rejected, excommunicated by society because it involved perhaps, not staying in the context of being normal. I think the question I just had for you there was, how did it feel for you knowing consciously that if you stayed in the abnormal box, the world would challenge you on that? And what do you think society needs to do in future? Because these cases, I'm imagining, are also going misdiagnosed out of fear that people are not fitting into status quo, but other people are just gifted. They've got other abilities, but they're now put into a mental asylum, given medication. I have in my personal family things that come up, like diagnosis of bipolar, for example, and what bipolar is and isn't, and some of the abilities I've seen some of my family do in those characteristics. I can't say an extreme entrepreneur, and we'll move on to this later, but extreme entrepreneurs tend to have obsessive compulsive disorders in the extreme too, and that's actually what makes them become successful. So we'll get into that in terms of exploring the duality of that. But just in your experience, I wanted to hear more personally, how was it for you being called abnormal and still realizing that, no, I don't think I'm abnormal, I'm just going through piecing back, trying to make sense of everything in a new way, so what was that journey like for you?
It was painful. There was a lot of fear to overcome because there were moments where I was really starting to doubt myself, and I had to go through a period of intense confusion. But what led me through is faith, a faith that nothing can overcome, which means when it's all dark and there's no more visibility and it's all darkness, faith is kind of the candle that kept me moving forward. So it's really, and I'm not talking about faith in a God outside of us, some kind of entity, etc. I'm talking about faith in ourselves and in the process that we are going through. And so that's what led me through all these difficult feelings, and that's what allowed me to overcome the fears that would have stopped me and get me to go on medication and probably still be on it today if I had done choose that path. So yeah, it was all about faith, and its faith is coming from the heart. So, and also there's another thing is meaning, because my journey had meaning. I was not doing that for nothing. I had a vision, and it's also that vision that was carrying me through. Without that vision, I would have been lost. So despite me being in that dark tunnel, etc., with my candle of faith, I knew I was moving forward toward a vision that's bigger than me, and that's what kept me going in the most difficult moment.
Wow. And what was it like for your family? Because you mentioned some of your family and friends. Well, how did they react to this transition for you?
I think it was a nightmare.
Why
Um,
is that?
because they were really afraid and didn't know what to do. And I mean, imagine that in 2017 I was sent to psychiatric hospital for a time. So they imagine for my parents, they got a son who's like kind of having a dream career, super status, and in a matter of months, he's being hospitalized in psychiatric hospital, completely changed his behavior, doesn't want to listen to, to them anymore, and he's being hospitalized on a regular basis. So for my parents, it was a nightmare. They were freaking out, and they didn't know what to do. Um, they felt very disempowered, and so I guess it was really a nightmare because also as parents, you kind of feel responsible for what your children are going through. It's like, I guess, we didn't give him the right education.
Yeah.
We missed it. So for my parents, it was a nightmare. For my friends, it was a very scary experience, very depressing experience. Because, we have to also understand mental health is still a taboo. And so, and I understand from my point of view, it's because we are all suffering. Nobody is saying this in this.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah.
And so when somebody who's looking so well is losing it, it's kind of sending back people to their own insecurity and their fear of losing it. And something was a very, very difficult moment for everyone. And for example, I'm just now starting to rebuild relationship with my friends who were my friends here in Bali who were sending me to a psychiatric hospital were looking after me because for a long time they couldn't face me anymore. It was too much discomfort. So my parents now start to see. They see. Like they kind of start to be really proud and stuff. So that's really good. But that's because we are, of course, being my parents, they are more connected. So they really see now that I was right. It was a process of consciousness awakening. But yeah, they had a very tough 1 year and a half, for sure.
Wow. And who do you think was most affected between your mom and dad? And how did they try and get through that? Or are there any memories or maybe advice you could give for parents or friends who have a person going through this, I'll call it spiritual transformation that you were going through?
So I don't want to respond to this question who was more affected because I don't know. Everyone was very affected and I don't think it matters which one was more affected. Yeah. But that said, I think the other side of the question is very important. What needs to be understood here is that somebody going through this kind of process is releasing a lot of emotions and is going to be overwhelmed by these emotions. But that's also a process of healing. What's needed is a safe space for people to express their pain and their emotions and to let go of the inner shit that has been repressed for so long. And when we talk about inner shit, we talk not only, there's decades of inner shit, repressed inner shit, potentially even more because it's the inner shit from the ancestor that's coming out of the world. So, emotions are not there to make sense. But they are there to be expressed and released because otherwise they stay stuck in our body and they parasite. They parasite outside. Yeah. So it's really about leaving this safe space. Another thing that is important, but that requires special abilities because, for example, I see now it's the ability to sense making of insanity. But somebody who hasn't done a journey is unable to do it. I'm going to give just a short example to show it. Very recently, I was watching a documentary about psychiatric hospital in France, right? And it was very frustrating for me because I could understand the language of crazy people. I knew what they did. I knew what they were saying.
We had a
But,
conversation
I
about
was,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and but I also see what they were not seeing and what they need to see. But like when for example, there was this guy. It was like, so the psychiatrist came to him, and the guy was like, so the guy said, "So I hear that you have very weird ideas now." And it's like, and the patient says, "Yeah, I know I'm God, and I've created the coronavirus, and I'm everyone. I've created everything." And I'm like, "Oh, all right. So I know you're connected up there, but you
Yeah.
forget that you're a human being, right?"
Yeah.
But the psychiatrist, all he could see was someone deeply sick in need of medication. And like instead of acknowledging the person's perception and recognizing it and say, "Wow, it's great, this is a gift, you're now starting to connect to the divine and to perceive things from the divine." And that's beautiful. But aren't you a human as well? And aren't you seeing that from the perspective of a human? Bringing back to the relative dimension, because the guy his consciousness was in the absolute dimension, and if he doesn't realize that, it's a mess. And so
Yeah.
yeah, so it was like, so it's really important to have this perception. For example, me, I know that there's different dimensions, and when that guy speaks, he's speaking from the higher dimension, not from our dimension. Doesn't mean it's wrong. It's actually saying what it's saying, but it just needs to go to, you just need to make the difference between the two dimensions and to realize that as a human being, you are God, but you're also not God. We are one, but we are also separated. And this coexisting, this opposite reality coexists. So yeah, it's really important to help these people to make sense of their insanity and bringing them back to a place where they can get back to relativity, so that they realize that, oh, this is just information. This is not the absolute truth, and that does not overwrite every other thing that's happening in this world.
Yeah, yeah. So let's wrap this back to the collective consciousness, because you're taking on a task, and this is kind of interesting for me now to explore with you. It's like you've gone through that journey, so you have a perspective to see, as you call it, quote unquote, abnormal, crazy conversations, and see where that person is coming from because you've been there. Then there's the normal people who are judging based on actually projecting some of their own shadows and unresolved trauma from previous generations all the way to the current moment, which are just showing up because this person is a reminder of something they need to address. Did I hear you correctly there?
That's perfect.
Okay, so then coming now to your project of working with collective consciousness, where do you see the challenges would be? And we've worked together, so this is kind of interesting, on making sure you don't sound insane. If you're trying to bridge the gap, you need to communicate to people on all dimensions and make sure that you're tailoring it to the person in front of you. Otherwise, they will then quote unquote label you insane, or your project's unrealistic or from another dimension or too complex. Or you judge them, as you said in the past, of better than they do, and so they're stupid because they can't expand into another higher level of consciousness. So how do you deal with those problems? And have you got any examples for someone else maybe trying to do good as you are on such a higher level, on how do you bring the layman person to your cause? How would you propose to do it?
So there's many aspects to this question.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
As succinct and complete as possible. So the first thing is, I think it's about understanding. The first thing is to understand what is blocking people from accessing this knowledge. And here we go into denial mechanism. It's like this knowledge very often is not going to be compatible with their belief system. And as these people are identified with their belief system most of the time, the defense mechanism will be, no, I deny this. I find a reason to deny this information because if I take it, my ego identity is going to collapse.
Yeah.
So I can't just take
and
that.
have to go through making a new one.
Yeah. And the process is,
That's right.
to say the least.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So first is being aware about how these defense mechanisms apply and really taking it slow. That's the first thing. The second thing is to bring this this message in a very rational, logical, factual way. No woo-woo, no stuff. Everything must be very grounded, right? No shortcut, no, and very, very logical. Um, another step, another thing that is really important to me is to link it as a response to existing problems that people are concerned about, right? Whether they are personal or collective. So, because otherwise, I mean, why would they listen if that's just something out there? And if they listen, if it's presented as a solution to fix some very tangible problems and some that quickly, and some to which we don't have a response yet. Why? Because we do not have that knowledge, right? So, so I think that's the three main points that I see right now in order to understand that message economy.
This is interesting. Yeah.
And and it's not. I mean, it's not easy. I'm still working on it, but I'm getting better every day. But I mean, because if I see like that, my ability to transfer this message is really increasing. It's amazing. I'm like, I think so much more untapped potential because the waves beginning.
Yeah.
But those are the main key points that I can see right now.
Okay, good. No, thanks for sharing that, and I'd love to expand that another time. So let's now talk about one of the conversations around trauma, because you said there's past and decades worth of trauma in people, and you've been through the journey where you had to unpiece everything and make sense of it. And in that period, there was a lot of emotion, and emotion just needed to be expressed. But this is what could cause a lot of painful experiences, and you potentially could be dangerous to people around you, right? And I totally understand and have firsthand experience on that. But so coming to another new environment called external that could cause more trauma, this COVID-19 situation, how have you seen that things like isolation and what people are going into uncertainty, what has it uncovered in terms of people's past traumas? And again, any recommendations you'd give as to how your collective consciousness approach could help people navigate through these uncertain times, because people are acting really weird. I can tell you, they're just on autopilot reaction in some cases. At least I've experienced it in the business coaching world. But what's it been like for you in your communities, and what solutions could you offer there?
So first of all, and what we really need to understand is that COVID-19 is only triggering stuff that is already there. So it's just bringing to the surface part of the stuff that we don't want to see. It's a trigger. And a trigger is a blessing. Because it allows us, because it allows us to process, to express this emotion, etc. But I require a certain level of consciousness, right? To accept our emotions and our negative parts, and to be able to let them go through ourselves without overcoming ourselves, right? The problem we have right now is, as we are not aware of this, when we start to be going through negative emotions, we freak out. And therefore, so if I have to say, like, imagine negative emotions as mostly inherited from the past, and so a big bucket of water. And so when we are being triggered, these emotions come up. And so the bucket of water is start to empty itself. Beautiful, right? We're releasing our shit from the past mostly. The problem is that as we don't accept that, and we freak out. So while that bucket of water is emptying, we have it on. For example, someone is going to feel anxiety. And it's going to be like, okay, that anxiety is releasing. It's a primitive feel. It's leading to our past primitive, to our past traumas. That's very normal. But instead of accepting to feel anxiety and like, okay, I can rationalize that, it's normal, I'm feeling anxiety because we have many unresolved traumatic memories, and many of them contain a lot of fear. That person is going to feel anxious about feeling anxiety. Yeah. So instead of releasing the emotion, it's piling it back. It's repressing it, and it can sometimes create positive feedback loop, which can lead to really, really freaky behavior. To really trigger some during things like a positive feedback loop in terms of emotion. Let's say, for example, let's take anger. I'm feeling angry, and I'm angry that I feel angry. So I'm feeling more angry. So I'm even more angry that I feel more angry. And that ends up into an act of violence, a lot of like crazy stuff, And that's really where the resolution comes, because we are stopped by the accidents and the dramatic situation we will trigger. But all of this is a lack of awareness of what emotions are, where do they come from, and how we should let them go through us. We should express them in a way that are not destructive, in a way that are conscious.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, COVID-19 is just doing this job, triggering the shit out of us and the shadow. And you know, like this, when I say shadow, why people, why we to be repressed unconscious? Because we don't want to see the pain inside. And making the unconscious conscious is a painful process. It's painful and disturbing process. And in a way, COVID-19 is helping us to do that.
Yeah.
But as long as we refuse to accept what is happening inside of us and to consider it as normal, we will continue to repress it and we will continue to project it on the outside. And then that's where we have all these conflicts, all these you know, these people going at each other and being very nasty with each other. It's because instead of looking inside, they look outside. And the shadow, the part of themselves that they don't like, they will project it on others. And everybody, and most people are pointing fingers at each other and arguing useless instead of making sense of what is happening to them and to others.
This is beautiful. And I know we went into we've had a lot of dialogues. I think I'll bring you back onto the session to discuss more about how we show up in social situations and perhaps gamify an experience to help people make the shadow work a little bit more easier. So if I hear you right, the collective consciousness must start first with self-awareness. Is that right?
Yes.
And then be comfortable with being uncomfortable to work through those shadows, because until we do, they'll just keep being projected in the physical space.
Exactly.
Okay.
I would like to complete self-awareness because to me it's something that's connected to other stuff.
Yeah. Go ahead.
We talk about self-acceptance, self-awareness, self-understanding, self-knowledge. All of these are interdependent and interconnected. And so I really want to insist on the side of acceptance because there can be self-awareness if we project what we feel inside in order to stick it to whatever we want to stick to social media. So acceptance is key there. You know, I'm feeling sad, it's okay. Like I'm releasing sadness, and that's actually a really good process of it. I'm feeling confused, it's okay. It's like it's because I'm upgrading my system, and while I need to construct the new, I need to deconstruct the old, and that means confusion.
Well, that's a hashtag.
So
say that again.
Freaking out, So in order to construct the new, we need to deconstruct the old, and
I love that.
So that means confusion.
I love that.
So instead of freaking out and running to like trying to compensate this in all crazy possible ways, just going through the process, letting the response come slowly, accepting and trusting ourselves.
So this is bringing us, we have to, I could talk to you forever. This is amazing. As you know, we're going to also have some nice confrontations later in another session. This one is really good though for the setting of the foundation. But you mentioned something about allowing yourself to express and allowing the time. And then you mentioned with your family and upbringing, it's just people also doing their own work with self-awareness. Where do you feel having social skills is important when it comes to interrelating with other people as someone is going through this transition? And how effective have you been with social skills when it comes to your intimate relationships as you're pursuing your business? So
I really love this question because this is specifically what I'm working on now. So that has been kind of a weak point. Notably coming from a space where I'm like, I gotta reject what you say in order to be able to go on my journey. And I gotta distrust you in order to trust myself. And I've kind of carried on a little bit too long. So, when we talk about social intelligence or, social relationships, they are key. Because no matter what we want to bring to the world, like this can only be done with others. We are all interdependent and interconnected. And so it's very important that the self-awareness and the self-knowledge also help us to develop interpersonal skills. in order to be able to relate to people. And for me, I have to admit, it is something new that I can relate to people again. And I'm like a kid relearning that, how to build relationships um, that are constructive and healthy. Um, and it's so important. So I don't want to give like, I have no expert response on that because I'm such a beginner. And to tell you, I'm just taking a mind body class on, how to build relationships,
Nice.
valuable relationships. So
Nice.
I'm like, on that level, I'm a super beginner. So I'm surely not going to come. But the whole thing I know is that it's very important. And it's very important to understand where people are in their journey and to not be pushy, to not be. That was my biggest mistake, is that I wanted to convince everyone instantly. But I didn't realize that seeds of consciousness are not opened with a hammer. They need, they will open when they are ready to open. All we can do is create a safe space, a nurturing space for them to be able to open. And so yeah, that's the work of a gardener. And so yeah, I don't know if what I said makes sense. But yeah, that's where I am right now, and I'm probably gonna have much more to say in the coming 6 months here because I'm really working on that right now.
Yeah, wow. No, thanks for sharing that. That's really good. And we're going to touch on that in another time. But just a couple of last questions here. So, what are you most proud of that you've accomplished up to this point that you feel you've really mastered through your whole journey that's helping you in your journey today?
I think I had this exam. I've lived with these existential questions, and I've been taught that they had no response, and they were just to be scrapped under the carpet, and to live with nonsense was to live. And I think I've been on that journey for such a long time, first repressing the fact that I was on a quest to find a response to these questions, and then going through the most difficult challenge. But I think what I'm most proud of is that I found the responses and that they are so valuable. And I mean, just they are invaluable. And that they can make such a change. And so that's really for me like an accomplishment and a miracle, because I would not have think that possible. Um, and so from that, I'm really looking forward to find the right vehicle and ways to be able to sell it, because that's really amazing. It's really cool.
Wow, powerful. So what would you say excites you these days? What puts you, what is electric, makes you feel alive and connected to yourself and with source, as you called it, the upper echelon? What are the things that you do these days that really bring you alive?
I don't know, because it's kind of everything. It's small, everything is happening. It's so amazing in my life as well. I mean, it's really hard to respond because like, what does not.
Or lately, what comes to mind? Yeah.
Right now, what's really exciting me is my ability to build relationships.
Ability to what? Sorry.
I spent like 3 years where build relationships with people.
To build relationships and to keep them. What did you mean?
I don't know, to build them because I had lost them all.
Excellent. So why do you think you lost them? Just in retrospect, why do you think you lost them now that you're aware of all these beautiful things opening up for you? Why do you think you lost all the relationships?
I was always connected to the collective, and I could not talk about anything that, the collective. I could not relate to my own individuality and to other people's individuality, and I wouldn't care about their lives. And
you didn't care about me. I remember. It's terrible.
Anyway, I didn't even care about myself, right?
Yeah.
I was
interesting.
Like, it's kind of, I did not exist anymore, and other people did not exist anymore, and everything that was, the collective.
Yeah.
And so that was an important part of my journey, because that's where I accessed, most of the knowledge I have today, and I'm still there. At some point, I can connect there at any time. But at least I'm going back to my individuality, and I can see myself and others and relate to others and to myself. So
That's
that's really
beautiful.
exciting, and it
That's
opens so much
beautiful.
more, so that's really the excitement at the moment.
Wow. I'm so
And
proud of
I
you
have
on
to
that.
say,
Yeah.
thanks to you, Aaron, because
Really?
like, you're
Wait.
among those.
Because of the fights we had? What do you mean?
I was proud of it. No, no. I think where the big realization is when you started to ask me that I should not give people what they need, but what they want.
Mm.
Because suddenly you ask me to enter a process where I have to look from the other people's perspective,
Oh
and
yes, I remember that session.
and,
Yeah.
and that was kind of new stuff to me. I was like, but I don't know how to do that. And then when I started to dive in, that
Yeah.
started the process. Suddenly I
Yeah.
was interacting with people to know what they want, and then there was
Mm.
like so much realization. I was overwhelmed.
Wow.
Like the week after, I was almost ready to cancel to quit my project, but I was like, oh, it's fucked
Oh yeah, I do remember you almost quit. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
I almost
Ah,
quit
that
it.
was powerful. No, that
It
was
was such
powerful.
a
And I want to thank you for your courage. I'll acknowledge you later at the end, but it was a gift for me too. I just want you to know, and I love what you said about collective. I felt I saw myself through that process with you, and had you not been the person that you are, we wouldn't have gone further with it together. And even I came out of that transformed. So just want to acknowledge you for that, brother. That was, I recorded that and I've saved it in my transformational file. And that's very rare. I put things in there. That was beautiful. How long was that process? We had a conversation. I think we took over the whole session for a while. It's like a journey of a dialogue that everyone was just sitting back. I remember their faces.
Oh
What was
yeah,
that
yeah,
like for you? Maybe that could be good to share with other people about how you work with your shadow work and really engage it. Like you're such a courageous engager of this moment. So what was that whole journey like for you? And then you came out with this gift for yourself. I mean, I wasn't planning it. I wasn't expecting it. It's just we had an interaction and that was beautiful. But what was that journey that maybe you could share with the audience on when life or if you like your projections show up in a social situation and you work through that? How could you support people through that journey as well to not run away or you definitely don't run away, but a lot of people in experiences like that do.
sure. So to me, it's really about acceptance, and so the first step is really acceptance. It's like, okay, I'm gonna realize when I'm doing something inappropriate, and yeah, that I've overreacted, I'm being emotional or whatever. This is something that I wasn't the person that I want to be. And so, but instead of blaming and shaming and judging myself, and like I'd be like, okay, what is this telling me? What is it? What is there from? What's in the plate? And that might not be very enjoyable to
Mm.
eat. I mean, to digest, but it's the process. It's like,
Yeah.
so I'm going to accept this, and I'm going to go through all the emotions that it triggers, and I'm not going to try to rationalize too much these emotions. I'm going to let them express the negative parts that come with it. And I have faith that I will get clarity on the time. And so
That's
that's it.
great.
Like
I
sometimes,
love that.
I will spend 1 week very down, like confused, disconnected from my perceptions, like, well, I feel lost. But just keeping that face, like, oh yeah, that's a process. I know we can use to it.
I remember you
And I know
saying that the whole
clarity is on
time.
the other side,
Yeah.
healing is on the other side.
Faith and
So,
acceptance. Love
so
that.
yeah, and so what's beautiful is each time there's a veil for you. It's like when things clarity goes back, there's a veil for you, and very often it's like, damn, but this was in front of me all this time, so obvious, and somehow I did not see it, and
Yeah.
that's why I'm also so aware of denial mechanics and how powerful they are, because it can be the obvious, and everybody can be pointing at it, and we still won't be aware of it until that there is that experience, that moment where we got that aha and the veil fall off, and suddenly it's like, wow, there's a new reality out there, and not a new me, but I am more myself,
Yeah.
because that veil was an illusion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. So let's just chat about, you mentioned a lot of fears that come up during the shadow work. So what are you most afraid of now, if any?
Coming out. Coming out in a way that I can be judged. I realized I was really in my comfort zone doing these speaks and these events. But I didn't have anything like writings or programs or whatever. Like it was just me speaking and sharing my knowledge. It was quite in my comfort zone. Not that I'm doing my online programs, but I'm doing my student programs, the research publications. I realized that wow, it's becoming real. It's not anymore like playing with some toys. Like no, we are starting to.
We don't do that around here. It's real shit.
Yeah, and so
you will be judged.
Yeah, I will be judged. I will be like I will, and it may fail. It may not succeed, and so that triggers discomfort and fears, which may not as much, the funny part is that I may not as much feel this fear, but I realize that there is behaviors of escapism, and I know that behind it is fear. So there's no willingness to go there. It's kind of, and I know it's fear, and no, I can feel it, for example, right now.
Wow.
Oh, okay.
Wow. Wow.
That's powerful. Yeah.
No, it's powerful. I'm really proud of you for that. Okay, just a couple final questions. And before I ask the last question, let me ask, what are you, how do people actually reach you? And what are you working on that you're excited about that, after this, when I post everywhere, people can come find you? So where are you mostly on social media, Instagram, Facebook? What's your website? I have it. I'll put the link in, but do you want to maybe share what you're launching at the moment that people can engage with on your collective consciousness?
Sure. So yes, first of all, so to reach me, you can find me on social media, Benjamin Castello, and Facebook, and if you send me a message, I will respond, especially if it's genuine and interesting. Other than that, the program I'm working now is I'm working on an online program, which is about becoming part of the solution to achieve global sustainability. And there is much more than doing recycling and stuff like this. We are going to tap into this good stuff, the collective and conscious, the origins of our past traumas, etc. So we're really going to have a holistic view in order to make sense of what is happening and to basically gain clarity, be empowered, and have a positive vision for the future when most people who are dealing with this issue tend to be confused, overwhelmed, and anxious or depressed. So it's really a program that I'm launching the beta. So for anyone who wants to do, contact me fast because that should come out by the end of the month. It will be free of charge, and that's a program that will be valued $300 in the future. I will also make a free program, but there will be much more stuff because for a program like this, I need to be engaged personally to make sure that people progress. I can respond to knowledge and anything that is made. So,
great stuff. And how long is the program? How long can people allocate time for?
5 weeks.
5 weeks. Okay.
5 weeks, and the investment time per week is going to be 3 to 5 hours.
Great.
So there's going to be. I love your process, and I have to say I've been inspired. There's going to be a video to watch, some PDF documents, and there's going to be pod meetings and meetings with myself.
Fantastic.
So 2 meetings per week plus 1 video and PDF.
And some gamifications, yeah?
Gamification is coming for sure.
Okay, good. We look forward to that.
But because I have, but you're right. Actually, that's really something I want to work on. This one, I'm going to gamify a little bit, but it will be soft compared to because I have plans much more to go much further.
Yeah, definitely. No, we look forward to it, and I'll jump on as best as I can, subject to the time, but definitely want to sample that because I really loved this interview and gave me some more insights, and I think you knew I was always going to make the time to do this, but just to get to know the source of your evolution. But I feel for everyone else, once you do this one course as a beta launch, if it's okay, I'd love to get you on when you get to the next jump as well. And then we can promote that. And then we can go deeper into some of the experiences and transformations that you've had as you're expressing what's coming through. So that's really, really fun. So yeah, we'll put some links on that and put your website links in the notes as well so people can reach you. And you said the Facebook best where you're active on most is New World Together Facebook page. Is that right? Or Instagram? Or where?
Your Together Facebook page is active, or you can also find me on my Facebook profile.
Yeah.
It's public, and
Great.
you can.
Great. Okay, we'll definitely do that. Okay, great. So just the last two questions now. I would love you to imagine at the end of your life, everything is done. And, we talked about this in our program about visualization, but let's just say the world's done. We have no more courses left. Nothing is left of you that people can access. What are the three lessons or three truths that you'd love people to remember you by, that if you could put them just on a piece of paper in three sentences, what would they be?
The three truths. First of all, what we share in common is more important than what divides us.
Mm-hmm.
The planet we share in common is more important than the country dividing us. The humanity we share in common is more important than whatever country dividing us. And the universe we share in common is more important than the belief system dividing us. That's the first truth. The second truth is that self-knowledge is the key to access mutual understanding and achieve peace on earth. The third truth is that we are all different and all complementary, and that everybody has a place in this world and must be loved as it is and cherished as it is.
Wow, powerful. I love those. And is there anything you'd like to share before I ask you the final question?
We are going through an intense period of transformation, and it's very grounding and disturbing. The old ways, the old belief systems are collapsing because they are unfit for purpose. They are unfit to deal with the challenge that we have in the 21st century. And so it is normal to be disturbed. It is normal to be scared. We are not used to that. What I want to see is that do not see that as a curse, but see it also as a blessing, as an opportunity for evolution. It is when we are out of our comfort zone that we develop new abilities. And so this is not necessarily the end of the world, but this is also potentially an intense period of evolution for humanity that can lead to really better future. So if we accept that, and if we accept this process of transformation, internally in the first place, because it has to be internal transformation. There's really so much we can create on the other side. We have a beautiful species full of untapped potential, and what is happening is tapping it. But if we but this will happen only if we can accept ourselves in this process. So yeah, that's really the message I want to say. Because I think what's
beautiful.
The COVID-19 is just the beginning.
Yeah, I loved your picture. We'll talk about it later with the waves. I follow you. You know that. I'm on to you. So that was really profound. Very good message there. So, brother, I just wanted to acknowledge you for so many things. Number one, I think we say this in gist, but it's true. I'm so grateful that you were labeled crazy so that you could detach from the old narratives and then find your way back to making sense of so many things and trying to come up with the central solutions. And this is what this platform is about, is find out how can we actually move humanity forward. So I'm really grateful that you went through that journey. You addressed your shadows. I've worked with you personally, and it's been such a pleasure in thinking I was out there trying to make a difference in the world, and yet you were one of those people that made a difference in my life and helped me with my transformation. So I'm really grateful for that. And I just wanted to acknowledge you for your courage, because I know change is good and we all want to see change, but most of us don't want to change. And there's just this crazy French guy who loves the process of change. And I've never seen someone with such a amazing appetite for the journey of transformation, as difficult as it is. And you're one of the most inspiring people when it comes to engaging that change transformation process that I've seen. So just wanted to say thank you for being here. And thank you for your courage. And I really wish you the very best of success. And then, the Leaders of Tomorrow brand is behind supporting you to connect with the African continent very soon. So Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, and I really, really, really grateful for that. And I really want to also acknowledge you for all the great work you're doing. Firstly, you're part of this transformation in many ways. Because many
Yeah.
feeling of that, and I know that we are on the same journey.
Yeah, brother, we're on the same. I love it. So, final question for you to wrap up. So, what's your definition? I would love to hear this. I've been waiting. I changed this question just for you. What is your definition of entrepreneurial success?
Realizing your purpose that allow you to contribute to this world in a way that gives meaning to your life and fulfill you, fulfill your mind, your heart, and your guts, so that you can live the journey of your dream and end up at your last breath feeling only gratefulness that you did not work. So that's what I would say.
Wow, my man. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Ben. Thanks for your time. It's been amazing. All right, guys. So make sure you reach out to this guy and you'll be hearing more of him in future sessions. Thanks.
Thanks, Sharon. And super.
Thanks. Bye.